Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, my name is here Kim, and due to this team scheduling issue, I will deliver the contents instead of them. Is it okay? Yeah. And now in this session, I will presenting about analysis of changes in users' attention on characteristics of social initiation of a robot in one-on-one interaction between a user and a robot from Korea Institute of Robotics and Convergence. The authors and affiliations are as follows. The presentation will be proceeded as follows. For a problem statement, the first thing is that many studies demonstrate the feasibility of expanding the development path of companion robots to include teaching, as well as numerous studies do. For example, there was the use of neo-robots to generate instructional content and measure user happiness and engagement. These kinds of trials that offering instructional information with robots improve user pleasure and concentrate on education for younger users. The second thing is that it's critical for youngsters to learn social interaction. There is a difference in the pattern of social contact and skill level based on the parenting approach of the parents throughout the early childhood period. And it's also important to grasp the concept of social initiation, which occurs when a robot attempts social engagement while the user is focused on a task. For this study, we recruited 10 uncharacteristic adults in their 20s. They are all general college students. 10 participants were divided into two groups, Group A and B. This division was conducted based on the gender ratio and age, but since 3 out of 11 were males, so males were preferentially divided and then divided into groups according to the age. Since among them, one of the participants didn't remember the contents of the experiment, so it was excluded, and then the results of the experiment were analyzed for a total of 10. The approximate information can be checked in this table. The robot platform we used in this experiment is a humanoid companion robot called Paigo. The experiment was carried out in a sealed room with only the user and the robot present. After instructing the participant to sit in front of the robot on the desk, a camcorder is positioned in front of the robot's feet to take a video of the participant. And using the Wizard of Oz technique, robot manipulation was performed in real time remotely in an area where the participant could not observe. The experiment was divided into two phases. The first is to observe the user's reaction in relation to robot's intonation, and the second is to observe the user's reaction of the positive and negative languages. Based on the robot's break time guidance, each expression phase is divided into two sessions. Expression 1 and 2 are the presence and absence of the intonation in the intonation test, and the use of positive and negative language expressions in the positive negative experiments respectively. These scripts are the contents of each expressions. Intonation scripts has same text but different accents, and positive and negative scripts has different text and accents, and both positive and negative scripts has its own specific accent. Each of the two experiments was conducted, and interviews with the experimental participants were also conducted to learn how the user accepted the robot's social initiation during the experiment. A total of 10 participants were questioned, and if they were unable to recall the details of the experiment, the recorded video was shown, followed by a question and answer session. After conducting the experiment, the responses were obtained through a short interview. The first question is, if you understand the social initiation that I explained, in which session did you feel social initiation in both sessions 1 and 2? This question was to see if Robert's voice with or without intonation has an impact on social initiation. 7 out of 10 participants responded that they had experienced social initiation in a session with intonation. And other 3 respondents answered that they didn't remember well about Robert's social initiation or just didn't know the difference from 2 sessions. The second question is, if you felt social initiation, which of the content or intonation of words influenced your social initiation? This question was to determine whether social initiation was affected by the content or intonation of the robot's voice. In response to this question, 7 out of 10 answered that intonation influenced the social initiation, and the remaining participants are those who do not remember the contents of the experiments in question 1 or do not know the difference between the 2 sessions. This question is to check how the robot's social initiation affects a person's concentration while they are working on a task. In regard to this question, the answers were varying from I had no idea to it was cute, it was pleasant, and it was awkward, fairly generic and unusual. So as a result, no consistent opinion could be derived from the responses to this question. The last question was, when the robot spoke in positive or negative language, in which cases were you more interested? This question was to understand the results of the designed experiments based on the prior pilot test conducted before this experiment. And in the pilot test, the participants expected that they would be more interested if the robot uses negative expressions. In fact, to this question, 7 out of 10 participants responded that they had more interest when the robot uses negative language. Also, when they were asked why do you became more interested in the session, they answered that it was more interesting because the robot uses the words that felt like a human, unlike the usual words and behavior of the robot did. This shows that when a robot uses unexpected behavior and language different from normal robot, it can attract more users' attraction. In addition, the 3 respondents who expresses more interest in using positive language gave a response that it was more interesting because it was after the consistently negative language. So, and concentrating on this point, we propose the possibility that the order of interaction between the robot and the user can be intentionally adjusted to the order of negative and positive expressions to further attract the user's interaction. The facts learned through this experiment were 3. First is, in the case of social initiation using the robot's language for the user, more social initiation can be experienced if the robot has a human-like intonation. Second, if the robot makes positive and negative expressions, the users will be more interested in using negative expressions. And lastly, if the robot expresses a negative expression and then makes a positive expression, the user will be more interested. For conclusion, in this study, the experiment was designed and performed to examine the user's reaction according to the presence or absence of intonation. 70% of the total 10 participants answered that they experienced more social initiation when the robot intonation was present, and 70% of the respondents answered that intonation was an important factor of social initiation. In addition, in the user reaction analysis experiment, according to the positive negative change of the language used, 70% of the experiment participants answered that they were more interested in the session using the negative language. It is possible to suggest a direction to arbitrarily set the order of the robot's intonation and the language it uses. In this case of study, there is a possibility that the results may be biased to some extent because the number of experimental participants is small, so conclusions have to be made through limited data. Also, there is a limit to making a universal conclusion because about 70% of the gender ratio is female. So it needs to recruit more participants and distribute the age and gender more evenly to analyze the data on the general person and to check whether there is a difference in responses according to age and gender. It is expected that it will be used in future research by establishing a method that can form a deeper bond in the interaction between humans and robots and effectively induce users' interest. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you for a great presentation. Is there any question from audience? Please raise your hand. Otherwise, let me ask one thing. So throughout that experiment, it looks like the intonation and also negative rank is largely affecting the start of the social initiation. So I wonder if there is some underlying condition for that. So for example, if the robot use some intonation with some just negative language, but use some saying something unrelated some sentences, does it also invoke some social initiation too?
Yeah, I think the most most effective factor that affects in this experiment is, I think, that is unexpectedness that couldn't be expected from the robot. That, like, we expect the robot uses some kind of prejudice that it only can use monotonous tone and only very good sentences like I cheer you, I love you, like something. But when it uses like, oh, your painting is like hesitating or something, it may attract users' reaction that expecting it will always express very positive things. And I think that's the point of this experiment.